All right. Hello, everybody. How are you? And thank you so much for watching this video. We're making this video for you to introduce the Health Equity and Justice in Medicine program that is brought to you by Wayne State University School of Medicine and the Detroit Medical Center. And we are really excited to produce this program for you, this glorious program. And so the point of this video is to provide an orientation to this program, to this curriculum for all you all that will be participating in it. We're hoping that this is the first year that we're making it available in a very real way to the Detroit Medical Center graduate medical education programs, and that you would take full advantage of it because it is needed, as you will soon hear. So my name is Dr. HEJIM Nodim Opara. I am a double board certified internal medicine and pediatric doctor. I am the founder and director for HEJIM, the Health Equity and Justice in Medicine program. I also wear numerous hats in the anti-racist, anti-colonial, decolonization, anti-oppression, liberation spaces, nationally, locally, regionally, and globally as well. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And again, thank you for taking the moment to watch this video and sort of get introduced to the curriculum before you engage in it. As always, we like to start with our land and ancestral acknowledgement, and that is to acknowledge that this land that we live, work, learn, and commune on are the original homelands of the Anishinaabe or Three Fires people, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, and that the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory of Detroit or Awiatanong must be remembered, and we do so with honor and respect to the many diverse indigenous people still connected to this land on which we gather. We are also committing to continuing to be better stewards of this land. I acknowledge my Black and African ancestors who made it possible for me to stand before you, a free Black African woman, and I commit to honoring their legacy. So what are we going to discuss today? Well, the roadmap is to cover 5 areas. One is to define terms that we're going to be using in the conversation in HEJIM. Secondly, is to outline the problems that we are addressing by creating and participating in HEJIM. Thirdly is, what is the call to action that we're answering through the program of HEJIM? And then what is the overview of HEJIM as a solution to those problems and an answer to the call from our many regulatory bodies, and more importantly, from the public, from the community? What does that look like inside of the structure of the Health Equity and Justice in Medicine program? So let's start off with defining terms, because communication is everything and it's the foundation of it all. If we're not speaking the same language, then baby, we can't understand each other and we cannot make progress. We cannot build relationships, which are the bedrock for change and the bedrock for progress, true, sustainable, effective, constructive, amazing progress and change, right? So we have to get on the same terms. So it's so important that we're grounded in a common language, and that when we're saying something, we know what we're talking about. So our program is called Health Equity and Justice in Medicine. What is health equity? Well, we borrow from the amazing, stellar Dr. Kamara Phyllis-Jones when she says that health equity is the assurance of the condition of optimal health for all people. And that health equity is about the process, even more so than it as a goal or outcome, all right? And to achieve health equity, 3 things will then be needed. One is that we value all individuals and populations equally. That is, there are no invisible, undervalued, or disposable people, that all people are included in this process of defining and then also executing and implementing and operationalizing and experiencing whatever it is that we decide is necessary to achieve health equity, right? That they need to be at the table. Hell, they need to create the table, okay? Secondly, is to recognize and rectify historical injustices. We cannot achieve health equity until we address the historical and ongoing harm inside of structural, systemic, and institutional and interpersonal injustices that produce the inequities in the first place. So that is critical to achieving health equity. This theme will be repeated over and over again. And thirdly, that we provide resources according to need, not necessarily the other way around. And why is that important is we have to be clear that equality is not the same thing as equity. Equality is not the same thing as equity. Oftentimes these concepts are confused. And so how can we illustrate that? Well, some of you are familiar with this, this visual here, right? There are numerous different types of illustrations of equality and inequality and equity, etc. But I love this one because it talks about inequality, equality, equity, but also names justice. And that's such an important, vital piece of the conversation, often missing. Okay. And so what is inequality? So you see these two young people, you know, they're very hungry for, we're going to call it an apple tree, but the apple tree is bent towards the person on one side, right? Not only is it bent, but it's growing more apples on the side of that person. So they get to just hang out, hold their hands out and receive the fruit, no problem. And that is an illustration of how things are in society, where certain folks, the system is designed to address them. Those folks are typically white-bodied individual, usually able-bodied, male, property-owning, Christian, cisgendered people, okay? And that is the way that they and their ancestors, and that has been, you know, passed on from generation to generation, has designed systems and structures, laws, policy, norms, culture, things that we just take for granted, but really were by design and are by design. So to ensure that people that own the characteristics or share their characteristics, again, white-bodied, cisgendered, able-bodied, male, land-owning, etc. person, are systemically advantaged. Okay, and that's important. Whereas at the same time, and in fact, depending on the fact that others that don't fit those characteristics are systemically denied or excluded from opportunities and resources. So that's the first picture, the inequality picture. Then you go to the equality picture, which is, so now we as a society say, oh, this is not really good, but so let's fix the problem. But we can't treat anybody special, even though that ignores the fact that certain people have been treated special the whole time. That was the norm in the first place. But so we got to give everybody the same thing, right? Because we don't want to treat anybody special. Again, by doing so, we ignore the fact that a group of people have always had a special treatment. We call that privilege. And again, by design. And so when you give these two individuals the same height of ladder, what happens? You only facilitate the person that was already advantaged by the tree easier access to the resources, to the fruit, as you can see. And the person on the other side with no, this is on my right side, with that didn't have access in the first place, still doesn't have access, you know, anyway, because the fruit is not what the tree was designed to not grow fruit on their side. And so we go home, I feel good because we made some programs and changed some, you know, did some projects or whatever to help the poor folk, the brown folk, the, you know, quote unquote, disadvantaged folk. And then and we feel good that we did some things, even though what we did not address the root cause of the issue and how did folks get to be disadvantaged in the first place, right? And so equity is a response to that, to say, listen, certain folks, where again, the system was designed in a particular way so that certain folks are not able to get access to resources and opportunities. They're not meted out equally. And so we have to be equitable. We have to respond to the fact that certain folks have been placed systemically disadvantaged to be excluded from opportunities and resources. So they need taller ladders. They need specialized, you know, resources to catch them up. And, you know, that's better. As you can see in the equity picture in the top left corner, the person on the right now can better, because we gave them now a taller ladder, so they can better reach the fruit, right? And our person on the left side has a shorter ladder and can still read the fruit. It didn't take away from that individual the access to the fruit. It just helped other folks to be able to access the fruit easier, right? And that's a very important concept, because oftentimes people who oppose equitable policies and change get into a place of threats, right? They feel that, oh, you're taking away from me in order to give to others. They get into this zero-sum scarcity mindset and zero-sum game, that there's only so much. And so if you're going to give somebody else, that means you're taking away from mine. That is not true. It's never been true. It is not and never will be true. It just is not, period. But that is an important message to sort of have people believe, if that's a political platform you're running on. Okay, that suffice to say that. Now, the issue with equity is that we're getting closer to where we need to go. But the problem here is that the fruit is still not growing on the side of the tree where our friend on the right lives. Okay, and again, by design, because the tree was designed to and was nourished and nurtured and cultivated in a way for it to bend over to advantage the side of our people, that person on the left there. So it's not answering, again, the root cause, the issue, the root issue, pun intended, at hand, is that we have a tree that was planted and cultivated to only nourish one side, while, again, excluding another side from access to its beautiful, delicious fruit. And that was, again, by design, so important that I keep repeating that, because if we know that something's by design, what does that mean? We can undesign it. It's not a natural, act of God. It's not random. It's not just the way things are. No, it's the way things were designed to be. So if a person did it, we can undo it, okay? Because then folks, many of them are not here, and also many of their, descendants are actively trying to keep this tree as bent as possible, to advantage a certain group of people. So going back to the illustration, so justice is what comes in to say, y'all missing the point. The tree is bent over to the side. We could give all the tall ladders we want to our friends on the right. Okay, the tree is the problem, okay, not the individuals. And in fact, if you can fix this tree, you don't even have to worry about specialized programs and all kinds of things and support and resources for particular individuals, because it is the system. And we have to ask the question about, we want everybody, right, to have access to the resources and opportunities, but we have to understand that the system is designed for that not to be the case. So we have to start asking and answering different questions, that come away from that individual sort of level of analysis and interventions, and look behind to say, what's going on in the environment, what's going on in the decisions, in the choices that are being made with votes and with money, in people who have put in power and making, again, decisions on our behalf, and the people that are putting those people in positions to make those decisions on various levels of government and various levels of leadership in our institutions and organizations. What is happening with our policies and our rules and our norms and our standards and our regulations and our laws, right? That systemically disadvantage a group of people, while systematically advantaging other groups of people. We need to address that, the trunk, the root, okay? And that's the conversation that we need to have. And that's where we come to justice, all right? So it's important to note this, and I'm sorry, there's a thing with the slides, but another important definition to talk about is health disparities, and that's what's behind the slide, and I'll fix that later. But health disparities, what are those? You're going to hear health disparities. Well, what are those? Well, those are the differences in health outcomes, okay? And again, it's important to note that they are produced by design. They don't exist in a vacuum. They are preventable and they are reversible, All right. And why 5 to 15 years is there, in some cases up to 20 years, is that here in the city of Detroit, there's a 5 to 15-year lifespan between races. Okay. And so Black folks die 5 to 15 years or are placed in a position through the acts of white supremacy and racism and structural racism, and the mechanism of weathering, but also by, again, the exclusion of Black folks from opportunity and resources, et cetera, and the advantaging, again, of white-bodied individuals. They have now resulted over time, this 5 to 15, and in some counties, 20-year lifespan gap, all right? And that is by design, is not in a vacuum, it's preventable and it's reversible. Why it's so important to emphasize these points about the reversibility and preventability of health disparities is that if they are persisting, it's because we let them persist. It's because we allow them to persist. We do that through not asking the right question, or refusing to ask the right questions, refusing to do the work necessary, make the necessary decisions around investing resources to solve the issues that will resolve the disparities or eliminate the disparities, right? We are making that choice as a society. And we hide behind all kinds of notions, philosophies, but the end result is to maintain inequities and disparities in our society. And so we have health disparities, and we know very commonly with diabetes and heart disease, in cancer, mental health, maternal and infant mortality, obesity, smoking, substance use, etc. Okay, but those are just fruit of the poisoned root. And the poisoned root is, again, in the systemic and structural forces, such as you can see in this picture, poverty, and again, poverty is mostly manufactured, right? Food insecurities and housing, and we'll talk about what that is. Those are all social determinants of health, quality of schools, and of course, discrimination, racial discrimination, gender discrimination, sexuality discrimination, etc. And so this, again, beautifully leads us to the conversations around social determinants of health. What are those? Those are the conditions in which we live, work, play, age, grow, worship, and die. And they are housing, education, social support, neighborhood experiences, neighborhood context, childhood experiences, family income, employment, etc. Access to healthcare, quality health services. And why do we care? Because what we know now is that social determinants account for up to 80% of health outcomes. The clinical and biomedical effort accounts for about 10%, genetics 10%, the rest of it 80%. So the question is begged as to where are we putting our money? Why are we not investing in the areas that are required to actually impact health? Right? And so again, these are the social determinants and that ultimately drives health outcomes and disparate health outcomes or health disparities, differences in outcome. And they are mediated through racism and discrimination, because this is America. And so when we talk about racism, then what are we talking about? It is very clear as we have these conversations in HEJIM that racism is a system. We have to internalize this, right? That is a system of power that structures opportunity and assigns value based on this idea, this construct of race, the social interpretation of phenotype, of how we look, okay? And one of the things that we'll unpack in our curriculum, in our program, is, again, how we in medicine and healthcare have been complicit as originators and perpetuators and beneficiaries of the system of racism, even from historically until today, until tomorrow, okay? And a key way that we do that is by continuing to pretend that race is biological, and it is not. Race is a socio-political construct with an economic, for an economic reason, which is capitalism, right? To justify, right, the economic, political, physical subjugation of people from the African continent as enslaved people and people on the African continent through the colonialism, right, to provide economic and political power to those who created the idea of white and whiteness, white-bodied individual, and the system of hierarchy that was founded in white supremacy. And we'll talk about those terms in a bit and define them because they will come back over and over again. If we don't have these conversations, dearly beloved, we will not make progress. Again, it will be going back to what we're saying, like we continue in the disparities because we allow it to, and we allow them to by refusing to engage in the root causes of these disparities, but at least doing the bare minimum of starting with having the conversation, having honest, truthful, courageous conversation. But you cannot get to the place of justice if you don't pass through truth and reconciliation. You cannot engender trustworthiness, right? Because people often talk about community trust and community trust, as if people woke up in the morning and just decided to not trust people. No, something happened to them. You know, me profane, but the institution I represent, right? That my white coat represents, my stethoscope represents, has engendered incredible harm, you know, onto people. It is absolutely appropriate for them to not trust, you know, the healthcare system, public health system, education system, name the system, criminal justice, because of the ways historically and continuously they have experienced, they have had really problematic experiences in this way. And so it's so important that we understand that if we're not having these conversations and naming names, we will never get to that place where we can start to engender trustworthy, that we can show our trustworthiness. It's not for people to build trust. It's for us to be trustworthy, and people will naturally provide that trust. You do that by saying the truth. You do that by having courageous conversations. You do that by naming racism, naming white supremacy, naming anti-Blackness, naming Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, heterosexism, patriarchy, sexism, and the list goes on. Classism, right? Name ableism, xenophobia, naming these systems of oppression and violence, and therefore participating in partnership, equal partnership with those most affected to eliminate these things. That's what starts moving the needle in terms of health outcomes. And so this system of power that structures opportunity and assigns value on the basis of the construct and invention of race, this social interpretation of how we look, does four things. One, it unfairly advantages certain individuals and communities, again, that tend to be white-bodied, male, land-owning, Christian, cisgendered, etc., while unfairly disadvantaging certain individuals and communities, those who don't belong to any to the group just aforementioned. And thirdly, sapping the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources. And we get this definition from, again, the fearless Dr. Kamara Phyllis-Jones. We understand that racism operates in multiple levels: structural, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. It can happen simultaneously. They are mutually reinforcing on these different levels, and they're intersectional. Okay, they happen and they feed off of each other and depend on each other, you know, as we experience it on all these levels. And through the program, we will break down, well, what does structural racism mean, institutional, interpersonal, etc. I think most of us are very comfortable with interpersonal, but we don't talk enough about the internalized. But really piecing out what it means to be systemic inside of structural and institutionalized racism is important. What is anti-Blackness? We are working in the city of Detroit, anywhere from 79 to 82, 83% Black, okay, depending on the source that you look at. It is important that we name anti-Blackness, which is rampant in Chocolate City. Okay, you can't have a conversation about racism without talking specifically about anti-Black racism, which in this country, and not just in this country, but frankly, in this hemisphere, underpins all other systems of oppression. And that is an important point to internalize and make clear, because some folks like to play oppression Olympics. Well, what about, you know, there's no whataboutism. All the facts is true. There are multiple oppressed groups, and all those things, all bad, end it. There is a uniqueness to anti-Blackness, and it must be named and provided the attention it deserves, because the approach to anti-Blackness is unique itself. And so what is that? It is defined as the belief, attitudes, actions, practices, and behaviors of individuals and institutions that devalue, minimize, and marginalize the full participation of Black people, visibly or perceived to be of African descent. Ultimately, what it is a systematic denial of Black humanity and dignity. And that's essentially what these structural and systemic and all the levels that it operates on. But these systems of acts of violence inside of oppression and the isms, ultimately that's the goal. That's the ultimate aim and result and consequence. It is to deny the humanity and the dignity of the people that it targets. And ultimately, what it then pretends is to deny Black people effectively their full citizenship and ability to participate wholly in the state, all right, in the nation. This is an important point, which is that what then tends to happen, because you then hear it in language, and you hear it, you hear it when you read policy and when you read the news in narratives, right? You hear this, and that is to position Blackness as inherently problematic in medicine, in healthcare. When we talk about disparities and how Black people are the one most likely to die of this and have the worst that and all that, and conveniently obscure the causes, the weathering, the environment, the oppression, the violence that resulted in, you know, these disparate outcomes. And we pretend that somehow the Black body is unique and different from all other human beings, right? And I heard this saying recently, and it cut to my soul. It cut to my soul. And the person said, well, you know, here in America, we treat Black people like a lesser white person. And that's it's very, very heart-wrenching as it is true, right? There is a creation of Blackness from the beginning, from 1526, later 1619 and on, that create in the invention of Blackness, right? And again, we'll unpack the history of it, by all those Charles Morton, Samuel Cartwright, Carl Linnaeus, all the big bag racist so-called forefathers and whatnot, and foremothers, because, okay, everybody was involved, right? And so as this idea of Blackness, it was created as, again, in opposition to whiteness, as a problem that must be solved by domination. So positioning Blackness as inherently problematic, and the ways I would like, as you listen, to think about the ways in which we have narratives around, you know, regarding Black folks, whether Black women, Black men, Black children, in healthcare, in medicine, in educational system, in criminal justice, in sports and athletics. Think about Serena Williams. Think about the young lady with our next tennis superstar, who recently had an altercation because she didn't have an altercation, but she had to speak up for herself because the person she was playing against was doing what is done and being a problem. And in speaking up for herself, the risk that she took, right, in doing that. But see, this is the beautiful things, that as we have these conversations and we become aware and awake and intentional and active, you know, in building a world, correcting the tree bent over and getting it straight, and then hopefully planting trees after that stand up straight and have fruit all around for everyone to enjoy. As we do those things, we begin to have different reactions, right? And so what I noticed was, for that young lady, the young Black lady, tennis superstar, that had to speak up and call to order the umpire's unfair rendering of the game, you know, is that there was a lot of support for her. There was a lot, and I was so grateful to hear even the commentator agreeing with her, like, yeah, she has a point, right? Because as we get aware, we can then become intentional about doing those biases that, implicit or not, the point is when they show up as discriminatory behavior, there lies the problem. And so we'll talk about that as well. So anti-Blackness positions Blackness as inherently problematic, rather than recognizing the long, rich, and diverse history of Black people throughout the African diaspora and acknowledging that Black communities across the US and the world have been severely disadvantaged as a result of systemic racism. And now, what about white supremacy? White supremacy, or you would hear people say the delusions of white supremacy, in order not to give credibility to this idea and philosophy. Some people might also say white supremacism. I actually tend to use white supremacism. I will use the delusions of white supremacism. But a lot of people are familiar more with white supremacy, and so that's why I'm using it in this context here. And a lot of people, when they hear this term, they're thinking KKK, hoods. And yes, that's true. Those are individuals who believe, espouse, and practice and hold true to white supremacist philosophies, sure. But again, to emphasize, and this is a theme, is that this is actually a system. It is a historically based, institutionally perpetuated, right? It's a system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and peoples of the global majority, right? By white peoples and nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. It is a system, and then it's perpetuated by institutions, by institutional policies and culture and expectations. My latest beef right now within our institutions is this idea of professionalism, which itself can be and is often a white supremacist construct and culture that is inculcated in our system, and again, as a means of control that expresses particular attributes and values while suppressing other attributes and values, again, to maintain a system, a culture that uplifts that which is upheld by white-bodied individuals as standard, and everybody else can go have several seats. So it's so important, again, as we learn these terms and their meanings, to apply that, to look around within and around to what's being highlighted. And so where are we going now that we've laid that foundation? What are we hoping to achieve? Well, we're hoping to be anti-racist, because if we are existing in a system of in a racist system, and by the way, if I haven't said it, that the system as it exists is racist, that's the default, that's how it's designed and created, right? And the answer to that is to be anti-racist. You know, there is no neutral ground where you're either supporting racist idea or policy, according to Ibram X. Kendi, or you are supporting an anti-racist idea or policy through the choices that we're making with our voice, with our money, with our votes, with our choices where we live, where we go to school, etc. Right? And so the question becomes, how am I anti-racist today? Dr. Camara Jones asks us often, where is racism? Where does racism exist here as we contemplate our life, you know, what we do, our work and spaces that we're on? How is racism operating here? And I add, how is anti-racism? That's the next step. So when that's identified, how can we then be intentionally anti-racist? And so what is anti-racism? It is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, and practices and attitudes, so that power and resources are redistributed and shared equitably. And my addition to that is power and resources are redistributed and shared justly. And just adding that on when we think about the picture graphic illustration we just reviewed, right? Is that it's not just the equitable resource redistribution, which that might be necessary in the interim, but it's also addressing the poison root. It's also asking, wait a minute, where is the tree bent that we need to straighten, not just giving the people, because again, the target needs to be the system, not just the individuals, okay? And this is a wonderful graphic that was created by Dr. Andrew Ibrahim's model, Becoming Anti-Racist. It's a process. It's not just I'm anti-racist today, but am I more anti-racist today than I was yesterday, right? And there are different zones, the fear zone, learning, growth, and then transformational. And this colleague modified or added to Dr. Ibrahim's model a transformational zone, because they were looking through the lens of communities and organizations, not just individuals. And how can communities and organizations become more anti-racist? And there are wonderful examples there, which we will unpack in the curriculum. Where are we working to? Not just being anti-racist physicians, but structurally competent physicians. And what is structural competency? Well, it essentially is the skill set, right, to recognize that downstream effects have upstream causes. That when we're talking about health outcomes, poor health outcomes, when people smoke more, someone has higher blood pressure, people have poor surgical outcomes, etc., that we are linking it to, we are understanding that there are upstream causes of poverty and housing insecurity, food insecurity, transportation insecurity, and income insecurity, educational issues, etc. But that those have further upstream causes of policies, economic systems, social hierarchies, those structures that inform them. So structurally competent is that I understand the determinants of the determinants. And therefore, my intervention is to take all those things into consideration. So often we live here, right? Risk behaviors, disease, injury, and mortality. That's what we focus on as physicians and healthcare experts, okay, and healthcare professionals. But the ability to tie in, right, those factors, those determinants, and the determinants of the determinants, right, that ultimately impact 80% of health outcomes. That's the key. Right? That's the key right there. And so we are becoming those type of physicians that understand those and are able to make the connections. And part of that is the socio-ecological model, again, that we see that the individual is tied to is connected to interpersonal, is connected to institutions and organizations, connected to communities, structures, and systems. And we cannot have a healthy individual without having healthy structures and systems. And we cannot have healthy structures and systems without healthy individual and everything in between. They're all interconnected. So again, to realize health equity, we need justice. And to realize justice, we need truth. And to realize truth, we need courage, right? We need the courage to have those truthful conversations, naming the things, being vulnerable, so that that is the way that we can eventually engender trust, that elusive thing that everybody's always looking for communities to have in them for some reason. Now, my wonderful, one of the people I look up to is Professor Toni Morrison. And I love this quote of hers where she says, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. So we want to define justice. All right. And this is the idea that people are to be treated impartially, fairly, properly, and reasonably, and that laws, policies, standards, and regulations really are to ensure that no harm befalls another, and that when harm is alleged, that there's a remediation, right? So that both the accuser and the accused can receive a morally right consequence merited by their actions. In other words, is this idea that, folks should be treated well, right? And what is proper to them. And we would say treated, equitably, right? And that they don't experience harm, but that if they do experience harm, there is consequence, and there is restoration, there's remediation, and it should address both the accused and the accuser. All right, the consequence should apply where the accuser, if found to be in the right, receives just a recompense, and the accused, if found to be in the wrong, pays that recompense, right? So there's consequence for both. And so we also would talk about social justice and what is that, and numerous definitions. I just picked one from Adams and Bell, combined it. That essentially is an analysis of how power, privilege, and oppression impact our experience of our social identities. Adams and Bell says that it is the full and equal participation of all groups in the society that is mutually shaped to meet their needs. It is a process and a goal. It includes a vision of society where the distribution of resources is equitable, right? I would say, and just, right? And that all members of a space, community, institution, or society are physically and psychologically safe, secure. Now, I added culturally, spiritually, collectively, and contextually, right? Safe and secure and thriving. And that's really from a more sort of Black feminist liberatory stance and abolitionist stance, where it's, we don't just want to survive, we want to thrive out here. We believe in abundance out here, okay? And spirituality is an important, critical part of humans and human communities and human individuals, and needs to be named, and we need not shy from it. Again, from a decolonized standpoint, there is no fear of the spirit or the spiritual or the metaphysical. It's part and parcel of people's epistemologies or ways of knowing and learning and developing knowledge. It's and understanding the world, and it has its place. And so it's important to name that piece as well. So the humanity, dignity, restoration, and this like holistic approach is important. It is a matter of life and death. So it is important that we define social justice and that we talk about it in HEJIM, because it is literally a matter of life and death, and it begins with me. It begins with you, okay? And one last definition is cultural humility. Understanding that this process begins with me, and it's a process and it's lifelong, is part of what it means to be culturally humble. And so cultural humility ultimately is a lifelong process of critical self-reflection and self-critique. It redresses power imbalances in the patient and provider dynamic in the health, or rather patient and physician or clinician, a healthcare professional, and community dynamic. And it talks about developing mutually beneficial partnerships while advocating and maintaining institutional accountability in the process. And so it's important that we're talking about cultural humility and not necessarily or just cultural competency. And we look at that really as cultural humility as the next step beyond, if you want to say be best back and beyond, cultural competency and beyond, right? So beyond cultural competency, what's sort of cultural competency 10.0. And so this is a good graphic. I'm not going to go into that, but essentially is to name that with cultural humility differs from cultural competency. There's some overlap, but the emphasis on critical self-reflection is so important, that there's lifelong learning. There's this willingness to be vulnerable and humble, knowing we don't have all the answers. And there is an embrace of love and passion and empathy, equity, and reducing negative, having conversations about power. So those are the definition of terms, right? And so let's shift to what is the problem? What are the problems that have been noted that then justified the production of HEJIM? Well, the problem are fourfold, many more, but let's just distill it into 4 buckets. One is that disparities are continued. Healthcare and health disparities not only are they persisting and unremitting, they're worsening. Secondly, the structural and social drivers are increasingly noted to be these determinants of these disparities, right? Thirdly, there's an increasing public pressure that in healthcare and public health, we got to get our act together. First of all, that we participate in these structural and social isms that drive these disparities. We originate them, we perpetuate them, we benefit from them, we are them, okay? And therefore, we need to be held accountable. And fourthly, that we're not prepared to do it. Many of our practicing physicians and training physicians, although thank God the young folks of today, the students of today are doing an excellent job. I'm definitely more socially conscious and active in justice and equity work than their predecessors. But A lot of practicing people are those predecessors that are poorly prepared, and it does produce a frustration on the behalf of the clinician when there's this inability to understand or navigate the terrain of social determinants, as well as the structural determinants of those determinants, right? And so there is a call by our regulatory bodies, name them, right? So in the medical education space, LCME, ACGME, ACCME, so from the medical school, graduate medical education, and faculty levels, there's a call that we need to address this. We need to start equipping and empowering and inspiring, and we need to fix this issue, and we need to be better prepared and better able, and have the not just the tools, but the skills, and be in the spaces to name and get involved, be at the table for addressing these issues. As a physician, scholar, scientist, activist myself, I would tell you that I'm often the only physician and or clinician in many of the advocacy spaces. The only one any of them have seen, other than their own doctors if they have any. And that's in some ways it's by design. In some ways it's, we can do better. Okay, and so the CDC, the NIH, the United Nations, everybody, WHO calling on us to get it together, that we need to do better about being engaged with anti-racism, equity, and justice work. We're seeing it in hiring and in promotion, where DE&I and so diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, belonging, accessibility. There's so many permutations, but it really comes down to equity and justice for all, and identifying minoritized and marginalized folks and having a focus. And so, yeah, that's becoming, folks are asking before they hire you now, whether for fellowship or for a job, what have you done any work in this space? And tell us more about that. That's been one of the criteria for them to consider in hiring, and even when you are hired, in retaining or promoting, rather. Quality and reimbursement, hospitals and insurance companies are getting involved around social determinants of health, and how do we start to address these now they've realized, well, shoot, 80% of outcomes, and we need to get together and get our monies there. So they're holding practices, feet to the fire, to ensure that those factors are getting addressed. And there's so many ways that they're doing that. Licensure in the state of Michigan, to obtain and or renew your license, you have to show that you have done implicit bias trainings, for example. So in so many ways, there is an increasing call that we get better about social justice, about equity, about anti-racism and decolonization, et cetera. And so if we're not part of this, if we're not part of the solution, maybe we're part of the problem. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And so the solution for us is the creation of this wonderful program, Health Equity and Justice in Medicine, HEJIM. And so our vision is to develop the best anti-racist, structurally competent, and culturally humble physician change leaders who are inspired and empowered to transform systems and bring about health equity and justice in partnership with the communities that they serve. And so our mission, our aims and goals are to do three things. One is to understand and navigate the structural and social determinants of health, including structural racism and health system bias and discrimination. Two is to partner with patients, communities, multi-professional, in an interdisciplinary way, multi-professional colleagues and stakeholders to promote health equity. And thirdly is to effectively advocate for justice through multi-level transformative strategies in clinical practice, in medical education, quality improvement research, and policy. And we recently, last year, the AAMC and the ACGME, and for those, that's the Association of American Medical Colleges, and the Accrediting Council of Graduate Medical Education. These are the bodies that regulates medical school and residents and fellows. And so they came up with the DE&I anti-racism competencies and the clinical learning environment. This is what we want our trainees to be able to know, do, and understand around DE and anti-racism, for them to be effective physicians in the world today. And so those competencies are aligned, these objectives are aligned with those competencies. So I'm again honored to be the founding director of this program. And I thank my amazing advisory board seen here of not just faculty members, but residents and medical students. And also thanks to my project manager and research associate, who's also a medical student, Michael Ruprecht. And I want to give an honorary mention to my other mentee, student mentee out of the Opera Equity and Justice Lab, Ms. Haniye Zamani, who was also very helpful, and they just work beautifully collaboratively. And so this curriculum, what are the components of it? Well, we have monthly didactic sessions that cover a range of topics from, again, starting with the history of Detroit. We ground ourselves in history and understanding where we are, why we are, how did Detroit get to be here. A lot of us that work here may not be from here and may not understand why things are the way they are. And so we may come with biases that then show up in discriminatory practices and attitudes and behaviors. And so it's so important that we get to understand the why and the how, so that there is a compassion and a sympathy and empathy that informs our practice, a healthy, respectful compassion. And so monthly didactics cover the history of Detroit. We cover scientific racism, structural racism. We talk about microaggressions and bias. And we talk about gender bias and intersectionality. We talk about what it means to integrate social determinants of health and equity into our practice on day-to-day. We have various workshops and all those pieces. And we talk about what coalition building looks like and means and practice. And we are taught by interprofessional speakers, from various backgrounds, not just physicians. And also it's so important that we highlight the community voice. So we have community leaders who are guest speakers. We practice critical reflection, whether on site or afterwards as follow-up. There's a community engagement piece, an advocacy piece, scholarship and quality improvement piece. We recognize excellence in health equity and justice through awards at the end of the year. And we definitely have scholarship dissemination by having folks write up and present on their various activities and experiences through HEJIM. And that helps to boost their career development. And this year, we are starting equity, which is equity, T for trustworthiness, which is the theme of this year's first HEJIM symposium, which will also showcase our numerous projects and host a multicultural celebration at the same time. So we're really excited about that. And so the way that we break it down, all these magnificent things don't happen at the same time because it's too much, right? So it's broken down by years. And so I'm going to present sort of the majority of our residency programs are 3-year programs, but there is definitely accommodation for our programs like mine that are 4 years and up. And so, so this is sort of like the basic template, and then it's sort of it's bespoke and customized for those who are longer than 3 years. So PGY1, all you do is attend the monthly sessions, okay? Participate in the critical reflection exercises and attend the symposium when it's produced, and it's gonna be produced February for Black History Month, okay? So all you gotta focus on is TFS. Did you hear me? What did I say? TFS. What does TFS stand for? Be transformed, have fun, and survive internship. That's all you gotta worry about, okay? PGY2, you have this wonderful foundation in all these beautiful learnings you just experienced. So now you are equipped to engage with community in a meaningful way. So there'll be community engagement piece will be integrated here. This participation in like a deeper dive now in the scholarly development for equity and justice through journal clubs. And then you also will run an equity and justice clinic where we develop case series based on real life cases, and we apply what we've learned in our first year and the journal clubs and community engagement, all those pieces to understand, analyze, evaluate, and manage those real life cases through the lens of equity and justice, okay? And then you start your equity and justice QI. You identify your equity and justice QI project, you identify your mentor, you write up your protocol. At least you get that started in your PGY2. PGY3 is now more of a focus on advocacy and coalition building. And now you get to give back to HEJIM through HEJIM leadership and mentoring the PGY1s and 2s in their process. And by now you would complete your QI project, which we try to keep very simple and focused, and showcase it at the symposium so that you get a presentation out of it. We also will have a partnership with Wayne State University Commons so that it will be published in our Commons platform. So not only would you get to disseminate and present it, during the showcase as a presentation, but it gets to be published on our Commons. So numerous opportunities for career development through this as well. For everybody that is, and it'll be great. For everyone that is in a longer training program, we will work with program leadership to customize this 3-year template to accommodate for your additional years. And we are very flexible and adaptable as the curriculum is. For fellows, we're not forgetting fellows. And the last few years, I have heard everything I've needed to hear about the call for fellow development from residents, from fellows themselves, and definitely from faculty. And so fellows also get to participate in the monthly didactics. For fellows, their expectation is more around presentation for doing an ENJ, Equity and Justice Grand Rounds presentation. So pair their specialty. So if you're GI, what are some questions around, GI in the GI field through equity, the lens of equity and justice. And so whether it's stating that African Americans are more likely to have more serious colorectal cancer or die earlier from colorectal cancer, why? And it has to be not that, their genes, because that is racist. Let me just say that right now, right? It's scientifically racist, right? Because race is not biological. It's a socio-political construct. The identity of white has changed over time, depending on who sued for that categorization. So did their lungs change or kidneys change because the court said that individual is white now? So again, no, it's not genetics, right? What is happening in the environment? What are the exposures? What are the intergenerational heritage that is impacting upon these outcomes? What are we doing in the healthcare field in terms of not screening African Americans at the same rates as white Americans, not offering, the appropriate sort of next steps, very poor counseling. All this has been documented. So we are going to step away from blaming the individual and look at the tree, look at the system. What is going on in the system that is producing these disparities? And so creating a grand rounds, specialty focused grand rounds through the lens of equity and justice will be the ask there. They are also very welcome to participate in scholarship and community engagement as their residents and as well as advocacy. But at the bare minimum is the monthly didactic experiences and the grand rounds that will be very wonderful. Faculty are part of the HEJIM as well. Again, from calls from trainees and faculty as well. And similarly, the monthly didactic is open to faculty. And for faculty, there's a special teaching equity workshop series that we have designed for faculty to focus on how do we as faculty teach this stuff at the bedside, not, certainly at and beyond the bedside. Right. And we're also welcome to participate in community engagement and advocacy and we'll talk about assessment, but our evaluations, right? The same tools of evaluation that we will be as part of the teaching equity workshop, because teaching also includes evaluations of feedback based on the competencies that have been released by AAMC and ACGME. We are also going to be held, in a similar light. And so those competencies are across the learner continuums from medical student to faculty. So we have our ask as well. And so that will be part of the process too. So you might be asking, well, for the community engagement, what does that look like? And well, we have numerous projects. I want to start with Checkup. Checkup is the Center for Health Equity and Community Knowledge of Urban Populations. We're headed by Dr. Haiti Thompson. It's a fantastic center. And I'm honored, first of all, to have her as a mentor and friend and sister, but also just honored that is our chief community engagement arm. So it's a collection of numerous community organizations doing amazing, outstanding work in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. And so we have a cadre of folks that we can pair people with to have your community engagement experience, for which you're expected to just do 3, in that PGY2 year, except if you are in a longer than PGY3, a 4-year or longer program. So the requirements may shift in the years, to adapt. But if you're in a 3-year program, the expectation is 3. And your PGY2 to have that engagement. And there are numerous opportunities. We have a social determinants of health screening, documentation, community referral, and loop closure projects. And we can also do sub-projects of each of those are also sub-project. We have an ending race-based medicine task force that has lots of opportunity. We have a community aid resource distribution program by our social health task force that's resident-led under the leadership of Dr. Patrick Bishop, Dr. Rhea Green, and so many wonderful residents. We have the case series development. HEJIM itself is ripe for your participation. It's an implementation, frankly, study and project initiative itself. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. And also we are going through an evaluation period. There's also a lot of opportunity there. We have wonderful partnership with the Wayne Health Mobile Health Unit under the leadership of Dr. Phil Levy. We also have interdisciplinary collaborative opportunities. And of course, the ENJ, the Equity and Justice Lab, has numerous opportunities as well. So the projects are limitless, and we will work with you and your program to create a seamless, well-oiled process to achieve those requirements. And there's numerous opportunities, whether it's the symposium piece to get involved in. The School of Medicine has wonderful community engagement opportunities. The Department of Health, the Detroit Health Department has wonderful opportunities. There's numerous opportunities for advocacy, whether it's lead or in reproductive justice or numerous. The Social Health Task Force as named, our Mobile Health Unit as named. What I want to emphasize is that there's a lot certainly that has been shared, but we keep it simple. We will be here to support the process, and we're going to do it together. So I want us to enjoy the process, not really worry about the outcome or product. Yes, there's scholarship and QI, et cetera, but I'm not so much married to that outcome as much as your process, because the goal is that transformation, for you to do the real work of change through your training and beyond. That's what I really care about. And insofar as the project you get or the engagement experience you get involved with helps develop you, helps inspire and empower and equip you, that's the real piece for me. Okay, so I want us to sort of get in a place of relaxation and understand and keep it simple, and know that you'll be supported throughout this process, and you do it as a collective. We will do it together, and it's process over outcome. And if you were wondering, and I would say do it right now, as you have heard and listened to this long discussion, right? One of the frameworks that we use for reflection and we'll be using for our reflection is what, so what, now what? So what did you just hear or experience or see? So what? What does that mean? What did that, what's the translation interpretation of what you have heard? And now what? How did it make you feel? This is important. And now what are you going to do differently, if anything? How are you going to operate or show up differently in the world? And so this is a very good framework for reflection. I want you, as you have heard this, to start practicing that, because you're going to be doing it throughout, the HEJIM experience, right? And so start thinking through all that you heard right now and sort of, so what? Right? What does that mean to you? And how did it make you feel? Is it something new or older? And what are you going to do differently? So did you already know all this? And if so, it's great. But was anything new to you? And if so, what was it? And how did it make you feel? And how would it affect your practice? Right? Is what I would like you to sit with. So a lot of these pieces, some people might listen to this and might feel a little uncomfortable. That's okay. I want you to embrace discomfort, and we didn't talk about this, but we do set community agreements, and we set agreements around, psychological safety and respect and humility and comfort with uncertainty, and a commitment to justice and equity, even in our space, and to value everyone according to, equally, but to provide resources and opportunity as according to need, and that we are, choose to be courageous, right, and vulnerable. And so our power is stronger than fear, absolutely, and we have to really sit with that. I just love that. It's always encouraging to me as I do my work in these spaces, and I have to work very challenging lines. It's so important that I remember that I am powerful and it's stronger than fear. It doesn't mean the fear doesn't exist. It does. But courage is acting, taking action in spite of fear, not in the absence of fear, which is another thing, right? So you can reach out to me if you have any questions as a result of what you've heard. You can email me. You can reach me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, but mostly Twitter and Instagram at INNODIM, and my email, for those who may not be able to see, INNODIM@wayne.edu. That's INNODIM@wayne.edu. And my phone number is 734 XXXXXXX, because are you serious? I'm not giving that away on the interwebs, on this Beyonce's Wi-Fi's. So you can always reach out to me here. You will definitely get me, and I'm happy to share my number when you reach out. But this is fun. I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation. And I hope that you've learned something and you took away something valuable from this conversation. And I look forward to being transformed with you. I truly am. Every year, I learn something new in this program from you amazing people. And I myself also feel, transformed. And so I'm grateful that you're taking time to listen to all of this. You're amazing. And I hope that we will get to know each other more over the course of the next however many years, and that we keep in touch with each other, and that everything will just be great. So right now, enjoy your day, enjoy your evening, enjoy all of that good stuff. And I hope that we will connect very soon offline. Many blessings. Bye-bye.